What's going on, folks? Hey, welcome back. Hope you guys had a great Christmas, whatever holiday, whatever denominational holiday you guys have enjoyed. And if it's still going on, you know what? Keep those good times rolling. We are back with part two of Joseph Stalin, Man of Steel. And man, we still got a lot of stuff left to cover. I didn't even mean to do that. That was pretty good, right?
Yeah.
With me as always, you hear him chuckling over there. That man is colder than Siberia. He is the Sultan of Strain, the Dean of Green, with me always. Honored to be the guy I joined for this rambunctious jaunt through history every week. His Professor Adam.
Oh my God, that was poetry.
The pun was unintended.
But it was so perfect. So perfectly good. Yeah, after 1 week of Stalin, I still don't quite have the hate that I feel like I should for him. But we're going to get a little bit, I don't know, into some more interesting stuff psychologically with Stalin, I think, than we already have before. He's kind of people will call him a narcissist, a psychopath, all that kind of stuff. But he has these weird little intros of emotion that kind of pop up in weird places. And I think one of the weirdest ones is going to be coming up soon. So, yeah, he's just a wildly interesting person as far as how he gained his power. And now we're going to see how he wields his power.
All right, well, we're not going to keep you waiting any longer. You guys tuned in to find out how this story ends. Not happy, thank God.
No, thank God.
Well, it's happier than it should be, but it's a little bit, you know what? I'm not going to lie to you. This podcast is going to be very unlike the end of Stalin's life.
Yep.
It's very unsatisfactory, but we're going to satisfy you all kinds of ways today. So buckle up. We're getting back into Joseph. All right, where did we last leave? Where did we leave off?
Weren't we arguing that his name should have been spelled with an F at the end instead of a PH?
Yeah, that's right.
It feels like that should be that.
That does make a lot of sense, because wasn't Losef?
That was a B.
Was it Losef? Oh yeah, that's right. They can't figure it out.
Yeah, dude,
A lot of different ways to change your name. But I think, yeah, he was getting on with his great purge. He had just done quite the number on both his own party and the military, but
Phase 1.
exactly. Guess what? He ain't done yet. Yeah, apparently still a lot of people out there he's got an axe to grind with. That list, that lipstick list that we were talking about, it was one of those things where like it's got the rollout at the bottom and he just keeps pulling it and then it just comically takes off and just keeps trailing off into the distance because
Goddamn roll of toilet paper.
Because what comes next, as if the Great Purge wasn't bad enough, we get it followed up to what's called the Great Terror, which essentially, I guess you can't really call the purge. That seems kind of like an event, maybe over the course of a few days, a couple weeks. When it starts to last, a couple years, maybe you got to think of a different name for it.
Yeah, purge is quick. Purge is
it's
very
ripping off
fast.
the Band-Aid.
Yep. Now we can dip into the Great Terror, though. And the Great Terror was truly terrifying to know just exactly how it all went down. But this NKVD, this predecessor to the KGB that we've been talking about, basically starts purging the country of traitors. And when we use the word purging, it's purging in goddamn every way that you can think of. And basically what it is these cities all over the Soviet Union, there's just these lists made with all of these names on them of people that they felt have been disloyal, that aren't committed to the cause, that may have done something.
That were in opposing parties.
Yeah.
That were Tsarist loyalists, that people knew that were still in support of possibly bringing the Tsar back, or even just seeing what Stalin has done at this point and be like, yeah, you're doing the same fucking thing.
Mm-hmm. And there's basically three ways that you're going to go out if you're on these lists. You're either going to be arrested, you're going to be headed straight to the gulag, or just shot immediately.
There's no naughty and nice portion of this list. This is all naughty. And it got to the point where, so you would basically have Stalin, who was in Moscow at this point,
I think so.
and the new capital is now
Yep.
Moscow. And you basically had fucking quotas that the people that were running these regions or that were loyal to Stalin, basically, I don't know, we call them governors or some shit like that. You had people
Probably.
with the NKVD that were in charge of these areas. They had fucking quotas of people they had to kill, depending on how many people were there. So it got to the point where there wasn't a lot of like, it didn't take much to get you on these fucking lists. They would just do it for the reason of trying to fill these quota numbers. And they
Yeah.
said in some circumstances, Stalin, they would go over lists sometimes together of like high value individuals, and he would dole out fucking either the murder, the gulag, or just fucking jail time or any of that shit, and write little notes next to the people like fucking prostitute or scum or like cheated me in a poker fucking game once or something.
Well, like he knew most of these people. Was he just going off of
Maybe
vibes
the
or?
maybe the high value
Yeah.
ones, but you then had these people that were running these basically death squads all over Russia that were like, okay, I mean, we've hit 50. Do you think he's going to be happy with 50? And they're like, 55 is probably going to look better to him. So they just kill another 5,000 people.
It is in this case. It feels like it's always better to overshoot the number than undershoot the number. Like you got to make sure that you get it done and then some. So I know that this word seems to have sort of changed now with video games. These gulags. Mm-hmm. Is that Call of Duty?
So they call it like in the new Modern Warfare series, the Gulag is basically because the city is like an Eastern European or like Russian city. It's called like Verdansk. I sound like a fucking nerd right now. But anyway, the Gulag is basically the prison within that. But the Gulags were basically just like almost in a way they were work camps or concentration camps.
Yeah.
Like if you were sent to Gulag, maybe it would have been a stone structure or a prison like that. I'm sure they had varying levels of security for different depending on what you were in there for. But a lot of these places were literally work camps.
And is that what they are in the video game?
No, it's an actual like stone prison.
Okay.
It's where you go after you die to like shoot it out with someone else to try to get back in the game.
That's okay. Yeah. Yeah, not to be confused with goulash, a delicious, delicious paprika dish. But it just feels like there's so many people that are going away from these lists that you would almost, if you were a person in these cities, you'd be like, where are all these people going?
Yeah.
Why does this keep happening?
Well, you had entire time. This was when you also start to get into some like targeting of like ethnic minorities. So there was a group called the Volga Germans who were basically like subjected to like forced deportation.
Crazy. Did you read the back part or the like back history of the Volga Germans?
No.
So basically they were enticed to immigrate to this area in Russia from Germany, and when they immigrated up there, Russia basically told them like, hey, you guys can keep your culture, you can keep your language. It was basically just like a Germany located on this river in Russia. And they were all German descent.
Yeah, the Volga River. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was just all German descent.
It was like a German colony.
Uh-huh,
Yeah.
exactly. And when World War II kicks off, he just kills all the Volga Germans, thinking like they've been here for centuries, but we're going to kill them off because they're of German descent and we got attacked.
Which is
by
crazy
Germans.
because his whole stance, like we were talking about in episode 1, was that you were a Russian if you were in Russia. That's what made you a Russian. So that's the complete contradiction to that.
It's just a very interesting thing that not interesting in a way that he would target them, because it kind of felt like he was targeting Jewish people. These quotas were literally quotas out of these cultures of people that they were just supposed to kill. Like like you were saying last episode, it's like culling the herd.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. And so you basically have these NKVD squads that are in charge of doing this. And in total, I'm not sure if I mentioned it last time when we were just talking about the Great Purge for the total, but somewhere between like 750,000 to like 1.2 million were killed between like
higher. I bet it. We're on the low side with 750,000.
We're in a situation also where we're only getting the information to come out where this stuff was kept as hush hush as possible. So that's just what we know about. So that all occurred between 1936 and 1938, while concurrently, this is where you have Hitler really starting to come into power because World War II kicks off in 1939, right?
Yeah. I just get hung up, dude. 750,000 people killed in 2 years.
And then more than 1 million sent to the gulags. So, and then that's like not like you're going to survive that. Those are just
Maybe.
the ones that
You got a
maybe
shot.
you, I don't know how much of a shot. They're just using you to fucking work at that point.
Yeah, they'll work you to death.
But we get now, after the Great Terror and everything like that. In 38, Stalin actually reversed his stance. He came out. I'm pretty sure public opinion after they noticed 750,000 people killed and 1 million people gone missing. There's probably some people going, "Where's my fucking neighbor? Where's my uncle? Where's my fucking dad?" Like, what the fuck happened? So he reverses his stance on the purges, and basically he's like, "Okay, we're good now. All the internal enemies, they're all gone." And then he fucking turns and criticizes the NKVD for basically carrying out mass executions, and he fucking executes two guys who headed the NKVD. One of them was like Heinrich Yagoda, and then Nikolai Yezhov, who headed the NKVD during the purge years. So he makes himself, in some fucking weird way, in his own mind, I don't know how you see all this happening for 2 years, and then he just comes back and is like, "Hey, I didn't know you guys were. I didn't tell you guys to. You know what? You're bad. You're naughty. You know what? It's okay, everybody. I killed the two guys that were responsible for all this, so I'm back to being the hero again. We're all safe."
It's just such an odd bird. Just the way that he tries to blame that stuff away. And he really, I don't know. That's some of the interesting parts of his mind, just in how he can try to justify these things.
Who do you think? Because there's one guy that didn't get got during this Great Purge and this Great Terror, and it's probably the number one guy that Stalin wanted.
Trotsky?
Trotsky.
Yeah. He lives a little longer past this.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure that would have been the cherry on the sundae.
Yeah.
Had he got that final word and be like, it would have been like hey, we got him. But yeah, so I mean, and it's not long before. So you literally create this shitstorm in your country, and then in 1939, after you see Germany start doing its thing of starting to kind of shift all over Europe, start taking these countries and everything, the Soviet Union and Germany, this is when they signed the non-aggression pact that we talked about. It was the Molotov. Oh, what was it?
Uh,
The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. So you get the pact signed between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union that were just like, "Hey, we're not going to fight each other, but I think we can both just kind of take over these sections of Europe." And
there's
then,
some shit between us that I know you want, you know that I want.
yeah, let's just carve that bitch up. And so that signed as Poland is carved up, just a little bit later.
Well, and that's even. We've already seen the Nazi Party rise. We saw the Soviet Union tried to make an allyship essentially with Great Britain. They tried to be on the right side of things, but unfortunately, the right side of things was dragging their feet too much. And in that time, he's finally just like, you guys aren't going to give me anything. I know that if I sign this non-aggression pact with this guy that I'm a little sweet on, there's some things about Stalin and Hitler's feelings towards each other that I find, again, kind of fascinating. But if I can't do this the right way, I need to make sure that I don't get attacked, because I wiped out like half of my army generals. I probably don't need war with anybody right now. How can I do that? Oh, a non-aggression pact.
Exactly. What was it happened before the Nazis decided to go ahead and invade. Where was it? Was it the Winter War against Norway?
Finland, wasn't it?
Yes. So you have this situation where Stalin is like, "I'm just going to start taking land. Like, it makes sense that I start taking my area." So he goes to war with, yeah, you're right, it is with Finland. So the Winter War takes place on November 30th, 1939 till March 13th, 1940. I don't know how much we covered of it. I think we kind of touched on it during the Hitler episodes, but this does not go good for the Soviet Union. And basically, within fighting Norway, they're able to...
Finland.
Oh, sorry. They're able to only acquire 8% of Finnish territory. And I think after seeing that,
They got beat by a bunch of guys on skis.
I think the Nazis and Hitler looked at that. So here's the thing. I have no idea, and we should probably discuss this. How the fuck was that pact even signed?
What do you mean?
The fucking
In blood,
Hitler
or-
wrote in Mein Kampf that the enemy of fucking fascism is fucking like Bolshevik communism, and that they need to be wiped out. It's in his book. Like, he makes it a point to discuss that at length. You then have Stalin that's just like, I mean, that guy took power. I took power. That's what kind of makes me think that Stalin wasn't really he himself was not a communist. He just saw communism as the vessel in which he could control the population and enrich and empower himself.
Yeah, it's like we talked about in doing the studies for this. Hitler gets held up as like, this is what fascism is. I'm not too sure how far off that is. Hitler wasn't technically, he was technically a fascist. He wasn't truly a fascist. When you hold
He
up
was an
Stalin,
authoritarian.
totalitarian.
There you go.
Yeah. When you look at Stalin, he's sort of the same way. He is a communist. He is what the example of people use for communists. He probably was pretty close to a communist. In all truth and all honesty, he was a totalitarian... Fuck me. I said it the first time, right? Totalitarian ruler that just basically used communism to come to power. So
He was a czar in all but name.
yeah, I truly think that Stalin saw himself in Adolf, besides the lesser mustache, the lesser stature, the bad-looking lederhosen. But it's almost like he was sweet on him because he saw him as like, this is what I did.
A kindred spirit.
Yeah. So I think that there was a little bit there, and I think it was more to look past. Like, he probably read Mein Kampf. He's like, Bolsheviks bad, yeah. But I like the way he did it. I don't think he's really what he says
Yeah,
he
he's
is.
saying that, but have you seen the fucking uniforms?
Yeah,
Have you heard of this guy named Hugo Boss? Have you seen their fucking uniforms?
there's just so much that they had in common, and just like all the things that we pointed out in the beginning, the first episode, they almost mirror each other in so many ways.
What that loud man lacks in mustache, he makes up for in enthusiasm during those speeches.
Spirit.
Look at that left arm of his. But, well, apparently Hitler really didn't feel the same way. And so after seeing the Finns kick around the Soviets, he's like, oh shit. He's like, I could probably just pop in here and just take whatever the fuck I need. These guys are going to be fucking pushovers.
Yeah, he basically got stalemated on the Western Front because they knew that Great Britain wasn't going to fall, so he needed to go somewhere.
Do you think part of his decision, I mean, Hitler was like fucking Kenny Rogers, the gambling man, taking chances and everything. Do you think that he found out? Because, they probably Ribbentrop was over there trying to go ahead and put together like the non-aggression pacts and everything. So they probably had representatives of the Nazis over in Moscow and everything trying to kind of put this kind of stuff together because they weren't at war with each other. Probably some international relations type stuff. Through all that, it wouldn't be too surprising with as big as the purge was and how many of the military brass it got rid of for that to be part of the decision why they were going to invade. So like they come back, Ribbentrop is like, do you know he killed like fucking half of his fucking generals and military advisors? And Hitler's like, what? He's like, yeah, like they don't have a lot of people leading their military right now. He's like, that sounds nice. And then he sees this thing with, Finland, and he's like, they obviously don't have anyone.
Yeah, they
able to
are
lead.
weak.
They are weak. So let's just fucking shift gears. We'll pivot around a little bit and let's just invade Russia. They got a lot of shit there we can use.
It does make me wonder what Ribbentrop came back and told Hitler about Stalin, just to like not give him any ideas. Like, this is what Stalin did to his guys. We shouldn't do it over here though. Don't kill anyone.
Mum's the word
Yeah.
in regards to that. Well, so I think it was in June 1941, the Nazis launched Operation Barbarossa, which was the invasion of the Soviet Union. And when this thing started, first of all, they had like 1.3, or it might have been more, million Nazi soldiers. And these were also made up of like areas that the Nazis had conquered. So it wasn't just, Germans. It was also,
Some
I
Poles
think,
in there. Some
people that
Czechs.
were conscripted to go and fight for them. But they're lining up like on the border in Poland of where the designated break between like Russia and Germany was going to be. And you probably have some people that were left over still in the military, like, hey, Joe, like, I know you and Hitler have got like a thing going, but there's a lot of his guys just like on the other side of the border. Are you sure something's not up? Have you heard anything? And he's like, no, like he wouldn't do that. Like, I'm sure there's just some misunderstanding. He got fucking intelligence from the British
Yeah.
that they were going to be launching an invasion. He's like, nope, I think you guys are full of shit.
You guys are trying to sow deceit between me and Dolph.
You guys are trying to get between me and Dolph. Like, we got something special. He'd never do that to me. Well, he done did it to you. And it was basically kind of a Blitzkrieg 2.0 from what they did in France, and they basically just mowed right through all of what were the unexpected and unprepared Soviet defenses, and basically made it all the way close to Moscow. Thank God, despite Stalin's military incompetence, he's got 2 undefeated generals on his team.
Well, before we get to General January and General February, when the Nazis broke into the Soviet Union, it broke something in Stalin. Stalin went into like a depression where he went away to one of his summer homes for like 2 weeks.
We just looked up the name. What are they called?
Dashas, I think, yeah. And so he was just gone while the Soviet Union was getting their ass kicked. And finally, 2 of the generals or 2 of the guys that worked under him worked up the balls to go talk to him. And they went out to this Dasha and was talking to him. And one of the things that Stalin said was, he goes, Lenin built this and we're going to watch it go. Mm-hmm. Or we're going to destroy it or something like that.
Like, I just see him being like, after he finds out Hitler invades, he's like, that was just the last person to break all the trust. He's like, you can't trust anyone. If you can't trust Hitler, who can you trust? And it just makes him so fucking sad. He's like, I thought we had something special. I thought he really liked me.
He puts a black streak in his hair and he just drinks coffee and listens to like
shaves
music.
The opposite of the mustache out of the middle of his giant mustache. He's like, I will stand for everything this guy stands for, or the opposite.
This is what I'm talking about, where he has these weird little breaks in this solid exterior where he, like you said, of all people to break his heart and to break his trust, it was fucking Hitler.
Of all the people to actually put him in a state where human emotion took over, yeah, it was fucking Hitler.
Just the most amazing thing in the world that's what gets to him. Like his first wife.
Was he hard for Hitler, you think?
It has to have been, because this feels like the second time that he's talking about his first wife, and when she died, like all his feelings for humanity died too. When Hitler broke that truce that they had,
Hitler had started to melt.
Yeah, he
that
knew
frozen
that
heart.
He couldn't. There wasn't anybody else out there for him. Hitler was his last try at love, and Hitler broke his heart. Luckily, they
I will never love again.
Yeah, I don't know if they grabbed him by his pudgy cheeks and just shook his face, and they're like, "Sir, we need you. Your country needs you. The Soviet Union needs you." He ends up snapping out of it. They said that if he had gone on that way for like another 2 days, there just wouldn't have been a chance for recovery. So he snaps back into action. Unfortunately, as we alluded to in the first episode, and as Chris pointed out, not the best guy to lead an army.
No.
Not very good.
We talked fantastic about scheming and creating essentially coups and everything like that. But yeah, not a great strategy guy on the battlefield.
And we talked about this in World War II with the whole plan that he had put in place. He changed the rule that if anybody was to retreat, there was going to be a line of guns lined up behind them. And if they retreated, they were going to be killed. Stalin got a lot of people killed in Barbarossa before he really kind of found his groove. And I'm sure it was...
His groove ended up being not even his groove. He got so fucking desperate of not knowing what the fuck to do that he was basically like, why do we suck so much right now? And someone just finally piped up and is like, you know those guys that we either killed during that little purge thing or put into, gulags and stuff like that? A lot of those guys kind of knew what to do in this situation.
Smart as
maybe.
fuck.
And he actually ends up calling some of these generals back from fucking like gulags or wherever they were fucking forced to go to like command like in wheelchairs. And
Hey
shit.
guys, how was your vacation?
Yeah.
How was Siberia?
Comrades! So, little thing going on. But so finally, the thing that ends up turning this around is he realizes that he doesn't know shit about fighting a war and finally brings back some of the people that know how to do it. And
He knows what his role is. His role is to sit back and to manufacture as many tanks and as much armor and as much ammo as he can manufacture.
and ordered the gathering of mass amounts of people
Yep.
and meat to basically throw into this fucking grinder.
Yeah, and then like you said earlier, General January, General February comes sweeping into Russia, catches the Nazis with their pants down.
A couple of things caught them with their pants down. I mean, they charged in so fucking far. Here's the thing, too. If you're looking at a map, the greatest asset that Russia has, can you imagine? Like, I was always surprised looking at it that they didn't take Moscow and just put it right in the fucking middle.
They should do that with every capital of everything.
But just to get that far, so like the Germans, you know, they sweep across like Eastern Europe and they get into Russia. The part getting from Germany to Russia was like a fucking like hop, skip, and a jump compared to this. They have to push way, way into Russia. Not only that, as they start moving in, it starts widening out.
Yeah.
So the logistics of them charging in there, they have to be able to supply all these troops, and a combination of like supply chain issues, Hitler not fucking reading his history about invading Russia pretty much at any fucking point.
Yeah.
But then the fact that winter kicks in at this point and just stalls the fucking German advance. And that's really the one thing I think, in addition to actually bringing in the military people to run this thing, that's the saving grace that saved the Soviet Union from not collapsing.
Oh. We forgot the top man on his list because we jumped right into this. We'll circle back with old Trot Trot after we get done talking about Barbarossa.
Okay.
Because that was in 1940. This is 1941 and beyond. Some very crazy family shit takes place during this time. And in 1941, the Nazis happen upon young Yakov. And they take Yakov in as a prisoner. Now, Yakov obviously hates his father. We could probably deduce that.
Rightfully so.
Yeah. Got no problem with him hating his father. Didn't really want to be...
Vice versa.
Yeah.
Feelings were shared. The simple
feelings
fact that
mutual.
Yakov is in a position, the son of the fucking, basically the new czar,
Supreme ruler, yeah.
the supreme ruler of the Soviet Union, is in a position to be taken prisoner should be indication enough.
It should be. He didn't want to be there, but he was conscripted just like everybody else that was over there that I'm sure definitely didn't want to be there. Somehow the Nazis find out that Yakov is Stalin's son, and so they think they got some
Didn't
shit.
he look just like him?
He was a gaunt man in the picture that I saw of him. Kind of a handsome dude, though. Like, he had a look about him that if you were standing in a food line during the Great Depression, he'd be the hottest guy in the food line,
Nice.
for sure. So they use him as bait, just like you would at any time.
Propaganda tool, too.
Yeah, we caught Stalin's son. How great of a leader could he really be? They say, we'll give you back Yakov if you give us back some of the generals that you had captured. And the Soviets take that to Stalin. He takes a look at it. He's like, nah, we're not doing that.
Well, we
Bad
kind of
deal.
touched on that earlier, the whole no retreat. And the fact Stalin took it as a betrayal against Russia if you surrendered. If you were not killed in battle and you got to a point where you surrendered instead of fighting to the death, you were no longer kind of in that sense that we discussed a couple times before. That disqualified you from being a Russian.
Yeah.
So simply by the act of Yakov being taken prisoner, give us these generals or we'll kill your son. He's just like, I ain't got no son.
There's a little bit of some Trump McCain shit going on there where he likes his war heroes not caught.
Mm-hmm.
Just
He's like, actually, I don't have a fucking son because my son would never be captured. So do what you want with him.
we don't I think he ended up telling them that we don't trade generals for soldiers or something
Yeah.
like that. Like just a very broad way of saying.
And then the fucking Nazi leadership was like, nice. We can
They,
respect this
they
guy.
respected him
Yeah,
more
they were
for
like,
that.
all right.
This guy is brutal.
Yeah.
Little did they know that he has like 3 other humped children up in Siberia that he was knocking around with. Like, this wasn't just his only
Never even knew
child.
about them.
Yakov finally ended his struggles and just threw himself on an electric barbed wire fence while he was in the prison camp and killed himself.
Way more preferable than being the son of Joseph Stalin.
Or trapped and caught by Nazis.
Yeah.
Like, both of those things feel
Oh yeah,
a
can
lot
you imagine?
worse.
Can you imagine him even just hating his father, being like, "I hate that motherfucker." He said he doesn't have a son. They're like, "We're still gonna punish you and torture the fuck out of you for all the German soldiers that are being killed."
Yep. Yeah, you're going to be our pincushion, basically. So, luckily for us, and I can say luckily, truly in this portion of it, Stalin figures the shit out. Stalin turns things around. You get Barbarossa turned around. The Nazis are on the retreat. We'll do Stalingrad just in its own episode.
It ends up really being it. I don't think there's like some supreme moment of like military like victory. I think it literally is just a combination for the Soviet Union of the winter stalling and then basically just buying them time and being like, we have so much shit to throw at you guys now. It's now just going to be a battle of attrition because we're not going to run out of people anytime soon.
Was Stalingrad named Stalingrad when the war happened there? Had he already named a town after himself?
He had named himself just a few years prior.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it actually was that at the time.
Yes.
Crazy he was calling his shots like that early.
He named Petrograd Leningrad, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you had basically, he was just like, yep, he's like, I think we should rename this one Stalingrad.
But that was after Lenin died. That was somebody else dedicating Leningrad
Correct.
to
That's
it.
what I'm saying, man. To
Stalingrad,
fucking, yeah.
he just
I'm
called
surprised
his
he
own
didn't
number.
name fucking Moscow Stalingrad.
That's true. It probably maybe Stalingrad because they could have been like a steel town, and he was the man of steel. So maybe
I don't think that's even that
you don't
clever.
think he felt that way?
Nope. I think it's basically just like, I like this town. But it was also prior to that, it was called, it was the Tsaritsyn. Wasn't
was that the town that he took over the military duties in?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. So he had a little bit of a tie to it.
Yep.
Is where
That's
he
probably
goes.
what it was. Is like a great honor or something like that. It was probably named because he had controlled the military garrison or some shit there.
Learning
Or
on the
even
fly,
stationed there.
baby. You gotta love it.
There we go.
Yeah, he figured his shit out. And when he figured his shit out, that meant really, really bad news for Germany and really, really good news for the Allies.
Yeah.
Because this whole two-front war that the Nazis were fighting on just became that much more complicated because now Stalin's in his groove and they're moving on Berlin and there's just really nothing the Nazis can do about it at this point.
So in 1945, at the Potsdam Conference, you have Stalin basically pushing Truman and Churchill to divide Germany. And then basically, and during the war, even prior to kind of like the war ending and everything, that was when Stalin was going to Britain and the Allies and being like, hey, you guys need to start like a second front.
Yeah.
Because like we're doing all the fighting here and everything. And basically, I know that it had to be a situation where it was like, we have no option but to fight with this guy because now he's fighting against the enemy we need to defeat. But there had to have been like Churchill being like, did I not fucking tell you that this was going to happen? They're not out loud, but the whole time Churchill's sitting there, he's just like, you dumb motherfucker. Like, I tried to prepare you for this. We tried to tell you this was going to happen.
There's I think it was Churchill was pretty skeptical of Stalin, rightfully so. But Teddy Roosevelt was kind of enamored with him. Like, he really thought he was not a decent guy, but just like an interesting guy. Like, he didn't harbor the same feelings that Churchill had for Stalin. And I'm sure it's probably because Roosevelt was a world away ruling the United States.
I think that's exactly, I think
and
you nailed
Churchill
it.
had seen some of the slimy shit that he had pulled already.
If your neighbor is doing a bunch of fucking shit that you're able to see over the fence,
Yeah.
and then your buddy comes in from out of town, and the neighbor seems kind of cool, like he's over in the garage drinking beers with you and everything. He's like, that guy seems pretty cool. You got lucky. You have a good neighbor. The other guy's like, no, No, not really.
No, dude, he hangs all of his underwear outside on the dryer lines, and they're brown.
Well, in 43, from January 14th to the 24th, that's when they all met for the Casablanca conference. And that was basically when they met and were Stalin got the invitation to meet with them. And that was, and he's like, okay, you guys need to start your war to draw up plans. So at that point, that's when the Allies actually become a thing when they signed that agreement or have that conference. And then everything we've already discussed. If you haven't gone back and listened to it, we did our episode on World War II. If you kind of want to know what happens and what the timeline for all of that kind of stuff is, go back, listen to that after this episode. But after World War II commences or not commences, once it kind of wraps up in Europe, after Victory in Europe Day at the Potsdam Conference in July 45, like we were saying, that's when Stalin basically talks to Truman, who now is president of the United States and not FDR, and tells Churchill, he's like, so let's figure out how we're going to go ahead and divide Germany and get this thing done. And he's like, and at the same time, all of the areas that I currently now have and occupy, yeah, those aren't going back. I'm going to go ahead and keep those too. And that's where we essentially get the creation of like the Eastern Bloc.
Yeah, I had watched a documentary and they were talking about Truman basically just setting his big atomic nuts on the table, and he tells Stalin straight out, he goes, oh yeah, and we have this atomic weapon that we have at our disposal, which this would have been before they dropped it, right?
I believe so.
Because the European theater ended before the Pacific.
So the European theater ended on Wednesday, May 8th. Oh no, Victory in Europe Day, sorry. When was that?
It's got to be really
May
close.
8th, 1945 was Victory in Europe Day.
Okay.
And then I'll figure out when they dropped the bomb.
Yeah, so Truman's trying to flex a little bit and maybe put a little bit of a scare into Stalin. Stalin's kind of undeterred by any sort of threat, and I think he knew, just based upon how hard the war was on the Allied forces, they're just like, all right, man, here, you can keep this Eastern Bloc, you can keep this shit. What we need you to do, though, is we don't know if these people want to be a part of the Soviet Union, so we're going to need some free and fair democratic elections. And he's like, done.
Because what did he say?
Fine.
It's not important who votes. It's only important on who's counting the vote.
Yep.
So
he knew that it didn't matter.
It was fucking 100% lip service.
He basically just gave a concession to something that he knew he was already going to taint.
So they hadn't dropped the bomb yet. It was August 6, 1945. So I think he did allude to them having that. Here's the thing, too. You just got out of, for Britain, a 6-year war. For the United States, a 4-year war with Pearl Harbor putting them into it, not counting the time that they were doing Lend-Lease stuff and supplying war materials. You have public opinion at this point. If there's been victory in Europe and you turn around and start a brand new conflict with the Soviet Union,
the guys that were your allies,
but you also, news reports have gotten back at this point about what's happened in the fucking Soviet Union, Stalingrad, all that kind of stuff, because that was worldwide type shit.
Yeah.
The public is not going to be supportive of you keeping the soul. They've been missing their sons and husbands and everyone like that for the last 4 years. Churchill was in the position of just like, I know this is in my fucking backyard, but I can't start this shit again. I'm so fucking tired of this.
And my people are not going to be down with this at all.
Yes.
And
the first place that's going to get fucked up is going to be Europe.
Next door.
And it's going to be, and we're in no position to fight back right now.
Well, everybody I think was just a little bit tired of it.
They had to. He forced them. There was no repercussion. There was nothing technically that the rest of the Allies, the U.S. or Britain, could do to stop it. And at the same time, they had to have been like, "Fuck, that sucks, but not our problem, I guess."
Yeah, those aren't our people that they're taking over.
And we still get it. You guys, wait. So part of Germany's still fine. You guys aren't going to touch France. Spain's cool.
Greece.
What about Greece? Was the only fucking country that made it out of this thing.
Yeah, just by the skin of their teeth, I'm sure.
Yes. I wonder how that happened. Greece. I wonder how it was Greece.
Yeah, I don't know. Slippery, I guess. It wormed their way to the grip. They were
All the
of oiled
Greco-Roman
up.
wrestling, the oils that they used for that.
Maybe that's what they did. Maybe they had a
Slipped
wrestling
right out
match.
of it.
It was like a Russian bear
Thank
against a Greek
fucking
wrestler.
God they did.
Yeah. Yeah. It seemed like it was hell under all these places because once he took over, he basically ruled these places under threat of the Great Purge and the Great Terror that he had caused in Russia.
What was his rationale too? He was like, I never want Russia to get invaded again.
Yeah, I never want to see my land tainted by war again.
So I'm
going
going to take all this as like a buffer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which technically, if you're taking it and it becomes your land, if
It's
somebody
your
enters
fucking
that
land, exactly. There is no buffer.
They're still invading you.
If you want that to be a buffer, guess what you do? You make those countries independent. Mm-hmm. So they have to stop the people invading them.
Yeah, yeah. Throw them some money every now and again, but as long as you have that land, you got a little buffer zone.
So quite literally, as soon as World War II ends,
We got to head back. We got to hit the rewind button in 1940 and go to
we
Mexico
will.
City.
I'm just saying, that's literally the start of the Cold War.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So prior to this, we're going to take a little step back, like Professor Adam was saying. We got to tie up a loose end, or more so, Stalin's got to tie up a loose end, and we get Trotsky. He's still out there.
He's still out there causing problems. He's still out there running his propagandist newspapers from Mexico City. And he seemed, I don't know if he would be comfortable, you would say, in Mexico, but he probably felt like he was a little less touchable until...
Untouchable.
Untouchable, yeah. Until one morning, he wakes up, there's a bunch of members of a local... I guess like a Mexican militia, somebody that Stalin had hired, a bunch of hitmen. They just fill his whole house full of lead, just shoot up the whole entire thing.
Like a scene in The Godfather. Just stepping out with machine guns and they just fucking hose the place.
And by the grace of Russian God, somehow Trotsky lives through this. And every day he woke up after that, he rolled over and he looked at his wife and he said, "They let us live again."
Mm-hmm. Well, if Stalin is anything, he's persistent.
Yeah, he doesn't give up. He ends up sneaking it was a reporter that had written an article for Trotsky to go
Someone that Trotsky had known, too.
Yeah, take a look over. Yeah, a known
like
affiliate.
Marxist or something, yeah.
Yeah. He needs Trotsky to give this article a once-over. He goes in, gets it through security. He's like, "Hey, I got this. I need Trotsky to go ahead and take a look at it. Need him to, dot the I's, cross the T's, all that kind of stuff." He goes.
I have a package here from Mr. Trotsky. I need Mr. Trotsky's signature.
He goes into the room with him, lays the article down in front of Trotsky. As Trotsky's reading through the article, the gentleman pulls out an ice pick and drives it straight into the top of Trotsky's skull. Somehow they said that he lived till the next day. I
think when they say that, it's like
12:01,
or you have vital signs.
Okay,
I think that's more what
maybe not functioning, but yeah, he's got a pulse still, I guess.
Well, and with that, pretty much comes the end of the list.
Yeah, he well for now. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he got everybody that he needed to. Everybody that was pushed
the end
in
of
front
the
of him.
OG list, the rise to power list.
Yeah, everybody basically that wronged him in a way that he knew them and was affiliated with them, but they got a better position than him, or just still an overall kind of threat to Stalin because he's still putting out all this negative Stalin talk that's making its way back to Russia. Obviously, he's probably crushing it before it gets into the Soviet Union, but there's still that chance that there's going to be an uprising led by Trotsky loyalists. So, you wipe out Trotsky, loyalists probably are going to disperse a little bit.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, getting back to the start of the Cold War. Well, here's the thing about the Cold War. Not a lot happens. That's why it's called the Cold War. But, and it's not, when I say not a lot happens, not a lot direct conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union. But what you do get is you get a lot of proxy wars going on. So on June 25th, 1950, Stalin is like, hey, there's this guy that we've been grooming a little bit named
Kim Il-sung.
Kim Il-sung. He's now in position of power in North Korea. He pretty much puts him in a position to start the Korean War. And he's already got all this manufacturing for war materials. He starts providing all that kind of shit to them. And if you haven't listened to our episode on the Korean War, we also cover that too. So you can kind of find out what happens during that conflict and how Stalin has his hand in that for basically starting a, what, 3, 4 year conflict
Yeah, I think it was 3 years.
with
And
the United States and the rest of the allies. Was it NATO or the UN at that point? NATO.
I think it was the UN. NATO
That's
is,
right. The UN was the precursor, whatever it was.
yeah, and then NATO is like a trade group or a different protect.
Something like that. So basically, you had the United States backing for the majority of the UN. So within 5, 6 years after the end of World War II, you have through proxy war Russians and the Americans and allies already at war in a physical war.
Yeah, so he just kind of kept picking. I'm sure it was the fact that when they divided everything up, they obviously divided Japanese spoils of war up, and that's how we got Korea where we got Korea because it was divided with the basically free democratic people in the South. You have communists that are being placed up in the North. What does Stalin love more than communism? Spreading communism. So if he can get
Yeah,
those,
we can't keep this to ourselves. We can't keep it here.
if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. Everybody's got to have a little taste of it. Yeah, he just there were so many little things that they had done. Excuse me, between like introducing different kinds of currencies in West Germany that kind of screwed up his spending in East Germany. A lot of manipulation and kind of chess pieces bouncing back and forth during the Cold War. I'm sure we'll just do a Cold War episode because
yeah.
it was
Just
very
talking of the espionage and even talking about like the shit that happened in Berlin when the wall was up and the crossing over and everything. So the Soviets actually, by the time that Korea started, they actually had the atom bomb or the nuclear bomb too. So August 29th, 1949 is when the Soviet or the USSR exploded its own atomic bomb.
which was probably a real bad day in Great Britain.
Oh, yeah.
They weren't pumped about
When the
that
fucking
at all.
Geiger counter started going off and they started taking the radiation. Fuck! But, so yeah, so in the 50s, Stalin basically turns his attention, who's he fighting right now? It's kind of a Cold War. He's not really fighting outside his country too much, but, some shit's got to be going wrong inside Russia, right? We're still having problems.
Yeah.
People still aren't super happy under this whole communism thing. Who do you think's at fault for that?
Got to be the Jewish people, right? It's always been the Jewish people. I want to do one goddamn episode where we do Europe or somewhere over there where it doesn't come down
And
to
it's
the
not,
Jewish
yeah.
people. I swear to God, it's the
We have
common.
not had good luck to this
No.
point, unfortunately.
And every single time they get blamed for just crazy shit. And this one had started where it was two of Stalin's kind of higher up allies that had gotten sick and they both died. And somehow through that, Stalin convinced himself that since both the doctors were Jewish doctors, that they had done it intentionally to try to sow dissent basically in Russia and in the Soviet Union by killing these two high up people. And it just started him down this path of, which is called the Doctor's Purge. And
I think we touched on this before. If there hasn't been like a time where it's just been nothing going on. Everything has always, like you said, he thrives in chaos.
yeah,
So from the start of his rise, there was never a lull of something not going on where there was something to draw attention away from all of the internal problems that could be strictly just the fault of Stalin. And maybe when things got to that point where he started hearing murmurings and everything like that, he was just like, okay, we got to invent another enemy or we got to invent another crisis.
got to be another scare. Got to keep these people on their toes instead
Yep.
of looking at what we're doing.
Yep.
Yeah, I could totally see that being just the reason behind everything that's gone on as far as all the people that he'd blamed before in the purge and this doctor's purge that's coming up, where he just basically starts turning on every. I guess it was mostly the Jewish doctors, but it was kind of just doctors as a whole. He was blaming people for penicillin being shipped into the USSR by these doctors from capitalist countries, so they were working with the capitalists. There was the desire for the Jewish population to have their state formed in Israel after World War II.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
And he felt that that was a slap in the face because their independence,
Betrayal.
their independence was basically a betrayal of the Soviet Union because they didn't want to be communist.
Mm-hmm.
So before he dies, which luckily is coming up very soon, he had actually signed off on plans for four essentially concentration camps slash gulags that were in the east of Siberia. And he had earmarked it for political dissidents and anybody that was causing political strife in the USSR, which at that point in time, he had wiped out enough of them that there really wasn't too much of that going on in the country.
Well, and the thing too is there's just this, I don't know if there's just this constant supply of death going on. So even just kind of jumping back to the end of World War II, I know we got away from that for a second, but just in World War II alone, 27 Soviet people were killed. 8.7 of them being
27
in the military.
million.
27 million.
Yeah.
8.7 million of those were in the military. 19 million were civilians. And so, so after the war, he had the NKVD. Basically, they were ordered to catalog the scale of destruction. And it was established that over 1,700 Soviet towns and 70,000 villages had been destroyed. So you not only have that, how much unrest and from the destruction and trying to, because as part of the winning side, they had to get reparations from Germany and everything like that.
Yeah.
But on that scale of destruction where essentially the breadbasket of your country, because fucking Siberia is probably not growing too much shit. No. So the area between Germany and Russia that was kind of decimated by Barbarossa and the war, that's going to take a while to fucking recover, especially those towns and villages and getting people back in there to kind of like run that kind of stuff. So between that time, kind of how we're saying like he has to turn his attention to somebody else, you probably have shit being real fucking bad and murmurings of like, this kind of sucks.
Well, not to mention all of the war reparations that Germany had to pay after World War II were going to these places that Russia had claimed as their area. Mm-hmm. So he's collecting the reparations for Poland and everywhere else around
and not
there.
Using them in Poland.
Yeah, no. He's using them strictly to fund his own endeavors. So these places definitely probably, you could see that there would be uprisings there, which may have been what these concentration camps were for.
Well, and even between, they said there was another major famine that took place right after World War II from like 46 to 47. It was a combination of like drought, the war, bad harvest in 46, and they still didn't have down this system of like these, community farms or whatever they called them. And there was still just horrible fucking management for food procurement. And especially in a situation where you have the entire world being torn apart by this war for the last 5-6 years, you're probably not going to be getting a lot of aid from anywhere. Especially when it's like, hey, we need aid. He's like, you fucking won. You're getting all this money from all these other countries. Fucking fix your shit. So it had to have been, because it's such a jump. And I know it's saying that, well, like Stalin was crazy and all that kind of stuff. He was sadistic and a maniac, but like from an unhinged, like crazy standpoint, I think that's where there's a differentiation between him and Hitler. Is like Stalin was basically just like almost strategic in the sense of like, they're kind of looking at me funny. Like I should probably give them someone else to look at and just fabricated something, because it's such a jump to just be like, who has anything happened in the news? Well, these two guys died. There were some Jewish doctors that botched or that could have not performed the surgery correctly. He's like, perfect. It's all their fault. And then by extension, he was able to go not just after the doctors and everything, but like you said, with these concentration camps that started to be built in these prisoner camps, it looked very, very similar to what was happening during Hitler's shit.
Yeah, and he had, I think, kind of a predisposition. Trotsky was a Jewish gentleman. I forgot his real name. Lev, the one that he blamed the guy's death on, had a Jewish father. Like,
Kamenev?
Lev Kamenev. He had a Jewish father, so he
had enough breadcrumbs.
Yeah, there was a general distrust there already
of doubt.
So, luckily, Father Time caught up with him. He had.
If there's anyone even more undefeated than generals January and February, Father
Father
Time.
Time. And I don't know if he had ever really planned to get old. Like, I don't know if that was ever a part of the game.
If he ever had a follow-up plan or a contingency.
Yeah, he thought that
Definitely wasn't his kids.
No, it definitely wasn't Yakov. That's for sure. But as time catches up with him, just like it catches up with everybody, March 1st, 1953, he's just hanging out in his study alone.
So he's 72, right?
He was born in 78.
Yep. Yeah, 72.
Okay. So, getting up there, I got to think in Russian terms, 72 is a very long life.
Mm-hmm. Not if you're living large, baby.
Yeah, again, for thee and not for me. He's just hanging out in his study alone, has a heart attack, and since he was so irritable and people really weren't too pumped to interrupt him, just based upon his loose nature, he laid in his study for a whole day before somebody found him.
And it wasn't like this incident was probably unforeseen how quickly it happened, but even since like 1950 and everything, his health had started to kind of like decline. And it got to the point where even during like meetings and get-togethers, he would have these like get-togethers with like, leadership and everything like that in the country where he never drank. I think he would drink tea or something, but he would have everyone else drinking. And so like a man that will send you to a gulag for fucking looking at him the wrong way. I don't know if you really want to be drunk in it, but it got to the point where he was almost like nonverbal in his communication. And I'm not sure if he did that for fear of like saying something stupid or kind of showing his hand of being mentally not all there.
Yeah.
And showing weakness enough to be like the lion that gets too old and the young one and is able to take him out and take over the pride. He felt that if he said something that it would show weakness. He got to doing like hand gestures.
I don't think it was weakness. I think it's that same thing that you've been talking about where he always has to blame somebody else. Mm-hmm. So if somebody misinterprets a hand signal compared to what he's saying.
He would like take a fist and like hit it to his teeth and they just interpret that as like he did. And he's like, so you want us to beat him?
Yeah.
Beat them? Okay, sounds good. And he'd probably be like, yeah, thumbs up.
That way, if anything backfired, he could say, well, you just didn't understand what I was saying to you.
I didn't tell you to do that. What are you going off of? I put my hand to my mouth. I was stifling a cough. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so leading up to that basically leads up to the heart attack. And yes, he had created such a culture of fear around him that people knew he was in the fucking study and still didn't go in to disturb him for 2 days while he sat there in a puddle of his own piss?
I think it was a whole day. When they found him, too, all of his pushback and reprisal against doctors, they were like, we're not going to go check on him. We don't want to treat him because if they had done anything wrong and he somehow lived through it, they were going to be killed too. So everybody just kind of hung back.
Yeah, even if you saved him in order to cover up the information about the weakness of the fucking dear leader, it's going to be like, you know what? He'd like to offer his sincere condolences. Now we're going to shoot you in the back of the head.
There's zero that you can do about it. Finally, they work up the courage to go in there. There was some wild story about a cleaning lady that was in his palace that came over.
I see some surly little Russian maid coming in there. She's like, get out of the way. I need to clean it. He's dead. He's dead.
Yeah, she like lifts him up to try to mop the piss up underneath him or something like that. They end up getting him onto a couch. They start feeding him medicine and trying to get better.
They put leeches on him. Apparently that was still a fucking thing. And I mean, I guess that shows you
it's Russia, buddy. I feel like that's
I don't think a Jewish doctor is going to tell you to put leeches. I think they basically had to find somebody, and they were like, "What do we do?" And the last doctor they could drum up had been out of practice for 30 years. He's like, "We used to use leeches, so maybe leeches for a heart attack."
Let's try leeches. Did you try breathing into his mouth? Maybe startling him a little bit. Maybe he's just like,
do we have any penicillin? No, we won't import it. It's evil. But yeah, so finally, after 4 days of that, he dies in Moscow of a possible cerebral hemorrhage. Regardless or not, I don't think he was going to be recovering from that. I don't think the leeches were going to be enough to bring him around.
No, and just sent shockwaves throughout the Soviet Union because everybody that benefited under him just loved him. They thought that he was the man that brought the Soviet Union up with everybody else
Do
in
you
the
think
world.
anybody that really the people that would have a problem with him are dead?
True.
And there's a lot of them that are dead. So I think it's like, oh, the Soviet Union mourned the loss. Do you think they mourned the loss in the same way that like you cry now? Everyone has to be shown crying to the picture that you're forced to have in your fucking house.
I mean, they said that during the demonstrations in Red Square, when they were bringing his body through, there was something like 500 people that were crushed.
Yes,
That's
killed.
how serious this whole thing was, and how badly everybody wanted to see and pay their respects to him. That there were people dying while they were mourning this dude's loss. He kind of became like, if you were going to do anything artistically in the Soviet Union, you had to pay homage to Stalin in some way. He had to be in all the writings. He had to be in all the books, the movies, anything like that. Had to be some reference to Stalin the whole entire time. And after that, the next guy that came in charge, everybody was really worried because Stalin had been telling them for a long time and got it in their heads that once Stalin goes, probably to try to preserve himself, once Stalin goes, the house of cards falls.
Yeah.
Everybody underneath it's going to fuck
It
it
ends
up.
with me.
Uh-huh.
I'm taking it all with me.
Guarantee that's what he said the whole entire time. He's succeeded by a guy named Nikita Khrushchev. And Khrushchev is like the first one to try and break the cult of personality that Stalin had built up, and was talking about how he doesn't need to be idolized the way that he is, and he wasn't the greatest person alive, and just basically tried to turn around a lot of the Stalinism that was in the Soviet Union because I think Khrushchev probably couldn't live up to what Stalin had done because, for all intents and purposes, Stalin was an awful, evil, terrible, terrible man that killed millions upon millions of people. But this is the worst part of it, he got it fucking done. He brought them into industrial age technology.
They said he came to power when they were using the horse and plow and brought them into like planes and cars.
Yeah, like it's so, he was not a good person, but there is a way that you can look at it and be like, damn, that's sort of impressive what he did. And then you hear how he got it done. It's like, never mind.
Yeah.
Not good.
Well, when he died, he got the linen treatment. He gave himself the full linen package. So his body was embalmed. It was placed for display in the Moscow House of Unions for 3 days. And that was where the crowds we were talking about were so big that there was that huge crush. So and this wasn't even the funeral. The funeral was like on the 9th of March. He was laid to rest in Lenin's mausoleum in Red Square. They said hundreds of thousands attended. And then there was the Chinese government instituted a period of official mourning for his death. And then in a weird juxtaposition, I know, but in a weird juxtaposition to that, at the same time, there was not at the same time, but like also there was a memorial service in his honor that was held at St. George the Martyr in London.
Really?
So, and I mean, I don't know if that was done. I had to read that a couple times. I mean, like, wow, like even after all, like the cold, like the shit, like, because the Cold War still goes on.
Yeah.
That doesn't end. But like after all the shit that like, do you think it was just a token thing? Is like, oh man, like, are we going to be petty if we don't do this? Because like technically he did contribute and be a part of the Allies. So if we don't do this, it's like disrespectful. Like, I think it had to do more so than that, than the people of London being like, we should have a memorial for him.
No, it was 100% them having to show respect for a guy who, it's tough to admit, but
We were far enough away. The U.S. was far enough away that we're just like, no, we're good.
Yeah.
We don't feel like we're good.
Thanks.
Are you guys doing it? Just sign our name on the card.
Put
our name on the card.
Yeah. But it's so tough to look at Stalin and not think the butterfly effect again. If Trotsky was the one that came out on top and Stalin had fallen earlier and Trotsky was the guy that was in charge of all of Russia, all of the Soviet Union during World War II, like, does the non-aggression pact happen with Germany? Do they attack the Soviet Union. Like, does Trotsky change World War II enough? Does he just align with Hitler because it's sort of in the same vein?
I'll play the game with you. No, I think what ends up happening, because I think one thing kind of led to another series of events that Stalin was a part of. So, yeah, you have the non-aggression pact, but you also had Stalin having to ignore many obvious things. And then I don't know if you run into him even invading Finland. If it's Trotsky or someone else, because that was all Stalin. Like, if you don't
Yeah.
invade Finland and you don't show your hand, that you have a weak hand, that's going to be a deterrent right there.
Well, and then you also back down to they might not have looked so bad in the military because Trotsky wouldn't have killed all those high ranking military members.
Yeah.
So they would have been more of a power. But at the same time, I don't know if the USSR would have been up to snuff enough militarily without all that industrialization to fend off the Germans. Because you have to think that all those factories that were built and run during Stalin's time wouldn't have been there as much to prepare
Yeah,
for
it wouldn't have been
war.
such an extreme shift over into industrialization. It might have been a little more gradual.
Yeah, it's endlessly. You could do it all day and just think about all these little twists and turns. But Stalin, being a man who killed so many people, it's when we've been comparing him to Hitler the whole entire time. And I heard this, and I think you did too. And it's kind of a sentiment that sort of wrapped it in a good bow for me is Stalin has the body count. Stalin killed many more millions than Hitler did. At the same time, though, Stalin ran a country for a very long time. And if Hitler had had the same amount of time, there's no telling how many bodies that he would have had under him.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think we discussed this last episode too, where you're comparing two things together, and because one was so evil but also was defeated and was the cause of all this kind of stuff, then you're kind of like, well, he's the worst. And then you look at Stalin, whereas, like, Hitler is responsible for all of the deaths. You could almost say directly responsible for all of the deaths in World War II. So you can pin that all on him. For Russia and for Stalin, you can of course pin all of the deaths for, the, I don't know, it's a shared total for the Soviet soldiers killed and everything like that.
Yeah.
Probably some of the civilians as well. But you have this body count from, like, the famines and all of this stuff that was not caused by active war, but was caused by poor decisions for Stalin. Just even with the details that we have, and I think me and you I don't think we touched on it on here, but if all of the factual information came out and we had everything laid bare in front of us for both Hitler and Stalin, I don't think there would be a contest between Hitler and Stalin. The motives are different, and the motives are more evil in one way or another. Where Stalin, I think, was just a machine, is like, this is what communism requires to survive. It wasn't saying, like, I hate, he had people where he was like, I hate you and we need to get rid of you, but to lesser of an extent of just like, oh, well, we need to get rid of you for this. So no sweat. We're just going to do that. It's like he didn't see he didn't care. He was indiscriminate almost
Yeah.
of who he needed to get rid of. Whereas Hitler was very focused, but
Well, Hitler would kill people, but at the same time, be like, round those guys up. We're going to do experiments on them. Round those guys up.
correct. But
They'll
I'm
go to
telling you right
concentration
now,
camps.
Stalin did that too. The only
You
reason
think
we know
Russians did experiments on people?
on the Germans and shit like that.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck yes.
Really? Okay.
Yes. But it's kind of like we talked about before. We only know as much about all the atrocities that the Nazis and Hitler because they lost. And because all of that information was seized and gathered and interrogated, and during trials, all of this was, laid out to bear. If Hitler had never lost, you would never know of any of the bad things that are happening. We can directly relate this to all of the shit that has happened in the United States. If you really go back, if we were ever beaten, all of the bad stuff we did would be able to come out during all of the interior. It would be much more visible about, like, the Native American atrocities
Yeah,
and
way-
all that kind of stuff, because a little bit of, like, you lose once and that's when all of your weaknesses are going to start and all of the shit that you've done gets pulled out. Had Stalin at any point the Cold War turns into, the fucking hot war and it's World War III, but it doesn't go nuclear. There's battles. Stalin ends up dying and is replaced by another, regime is what it basically is. You're going to have all of the stuff. So there's someone to blame for all of those atrocities. No one else is going to that's alive is going to take the blame for those. So you're going to have all of the information and all the dirty secrets on Stalin coming out. And especially where you have him in control of the Soviet Union in almost complete control for, I think it was like 30 years.
Oh, I think way more. Oh, for him?
For him.
Yeah.
When you have, he had 30 years to do all this shit. Hitler did his stuff in fucking 9 or 10?
Yeah.
This guy had 30 years of stuff. And during that 30-year time period, never once lost control of the forms of like media, and he controlled the flow of information, what information was released and what information wasn't released. Mm-hmm. He was able to go ahead and stamp out dissension even before it had a chance to get a foothold. So the only thing that comes out of this, even some of this shit comes out because it was so like widespread and so big that you couldn't help but notice it. What was the stuff that like was kept on, like, can you imagine getting access to look at all the NKVD records that were never ever shown or never made known?
It would, exactly like you were talking about, if all of our FBI and CIA records were shown, there'd be some shit in there.
And you go back to like how many, if you look at the number just during like the initial invasion for Barbarossa, I think they said that during the initial invasion and after like they pushed back and stopped and halted the Nazis, there was like situations where like 100,000 like German soldiers would be taken prisoner. What did we talk about was the number of the guys that made it home? Was that 80,000?
Oh, I think it was like 4,000 made it home.
Okay, it was something super small and disproportionate. Yeah. Sorry. But yeah, it was like, so what kind of fucking atrocities do you think are going on for like war crimes there? But you don't get charged with war crimes when you fucking win.
Yeah. And I think part of the other reason that gives him covered too is kind of what you were alluding to, never losing but never being like taken over. Because for terrible
never
things,
being exposed.
Yeah, for terrible reasons. The USSR didn't break up until like the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So the Soviet Union, which I had no idea that it had gone up till the 90s, but you have all this time and all these years between when Stalin dies and the Soviet Union falling to where there's just a cover-up of all the information that never gets leaked out because the Soviet Union in the 80s isn't going to go back and be like, yeah, Stalin was a bad guy.
Yeah.
They're still trying to portray
anybody that was tied to Stalin, just like during the Nuremberg trials and everything like that. It wasn't just like, oh, well, Hitler's dead, so, and you guys all say you were just doing what Hitler was doing, so you guys are all free to go.
Yeah.
There was so many people that were, arrested and tried for war crimes. Had Stalin been deposed or exposed for any of this kind of stuff, there was no one there that didn't have skin in the game. Those were the people that had the ability to probably expose him for stuff. But all of those people who would expose him would also be exposing themselves and would be essentially accessories to it and charged as well.
Yeah.
So a lot of it had to be self-preservation.
It'd be really interesting to see. I think that for all the atrocities that we do know about, you are right. There's definitely some shit that we just probably couldn't fathom.
Yeah, it's got to be, and just the stuff we know makes him the second just
bad guy,
most horrible fucking guy. Yeah. It's fucking crazy, and it's so crazy that so much of it was inflicted on his own people. The bulk of it, was inflicted on his own people.
It was almost like they were just kind of his pawns, and he could do whatever he wanted with them, and that disregard for any sort of human emotion.
And he's operating based on a political system for the good of the people, but they're his biggest fucking victim. I think it just shows you like what desperation. We talked about the same thing in the Hitler episodes, is that when things get to such a horrible extent, you're willing to go ahead. You get more desperate to look for ideas that you can cling on to or try to work with, because it just seems it has to be better than what's happening right now. And so with Stalin, I think that maybe just life in the Soviet Union as a whole was just at that point under the Tsar that they were like, we just can't, anything sounds better than this. It doesn't matter what it is. And people were there at the right time who were able to go and seize power. And this guy just happened to be in the midst of them and be the fucking most cunning of them all.
And then if you're living in a city and you're drinking all the Kool-Aid and your life is getting better as industrialization is growing, it's going to be a lot harder to be like, yeah, well, it was bad before and now it's good, but this guy's really bad. And it's like, no, my general way of life does seem to be better.
I hear
than it
no
was
evil.
before.
I hear no, I see no.
Yeah, I don't live out where all those people just ate each other and died in the, out in the farms. I'm here. I have a factory job. I have a good life. I'm not going to try to raise any sort of suspicion towards this guy that changed my world.
Yeah. Oh, fucking crazy, crazy dude.
Yeah, it's nice to end the year on something that I think we were both kind of excited to do, and to know that 2024 is just around the corner and we got a lot more of this stuff going. It's nice to be able to put a bow on just another really terrible person.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we do shitbags good.
Yeah.
I think we do these shitbags justice of telling of their shitbaggery.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, guys, have a great new year. Stay safe out there. We'll see you in 2024.
Sounds good.
Later, guys.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit him with it.
Our Instagram is historically high pod, historically high pod, and we are on Twitter at historically high. That's historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.